branded as a slave and sold for coins. A cowboy burned the mark away and gave her a home. The iron was still warm when I found it. Laying there in the dirt beside the fire ring, handle wrapped in old saddle leather, the end of it shaped like a curled letter, somebody's mark, the kind you put on cattle. I knew what it was the second I saw it because I'd seen one used before, years back, when I was maybe 19 and too young to do anything but look away. That was a moment I'd carried a long time, the kind you don't forget. I picked it up, turned it over once. Then I looked up at the shed. I'd ridden into that stretch of Comanche Flats country hunting strays, 3 of Calloway's heifers that pushed through a fence line 3 days prior. It was September, the grass already going yellow-brown, the sky that particular hard blue it gets when the heat is pulling back and the cold hasn't decided to come yet. Dry out there. The kind of dry where you can hear your saddle creak like a door hinge. The spread I'd come across didn't have a name on it I recognized. Rough-cut fence posts, a main house that leaned, a bunkhouse with no windows to speak of, 2 horses in a pen that needed looking at. And off to the eastern edge of the property, set apart from everything else like it was meant to be forgotten, a storage shed about the size of a root cellar with a bar across the door from the outside. Now I'd been riding for Calloway's outfit 6 years. Before that, I worked the Brazos country. I'd seen men keep dogs in worse places than that shed. I might have kept riding. I don't know. But something about the way the bar was set, deliberate, padlocked, and the way those 2 horses in the pen were facing that shed like they were trying to tell me something, I don't know. I pulled up. Nobody came out of the main house. I sat my horse a minute just listening. And then I heard it, a small sound. The kind of sound a person makes when they've stopped hoping anyone will hear and haven't quite stopped making it yet. I got down off my horse. Her name was Celia. I didn't learn that for a while. First thing I learned was that she was alive, and the second thing I learned was that she was in worse shape than I wanted to think about. And the third thing I learned, when I got the door open and got my eyes to adjust to that dark, was that there was a brand on her upper arm. Fresh enough that it still looked wrong, edges raised and dark, the skin around it pulled tight. She pulled away from the light, pressed herself into the back corner. I crouched down and I stayed still, didn't reach for her, didn't talk, not right away. I don't know how long I stayed there in that doorway, long enough that a hawk passed over the yard twice, long enough that the light coming through started to shift a few degrees. "I'm not with them," I said finally. I kept my voice the way you'd keep a hand open, low to the ground. "I don't know whose place this is, and I don't want to know. I'm going to get back on my horse in a minute. You can come or you can stay." She didn't say anything for a while. Then she said, "They'll be back." "When?" "Evening, maybe before." I looked back at the yard. The iron was laying there in the dirt where I'd set it down. I looked at her arm at that mark. "You got a horse," I said. She shook her head. I stood up. "You'll ride behind me then?" I said. We made it off that property before anyone came back. I don't know what we looked like on the road, this hard-used woman on the back of my roan and me trying to put distance between us and that shed as direct as I could without running the horse down. I didn't look back, didn't seem to help anything looking back. She didn't say a word for the first hour, just held on her hands at my sides, not quite gripping, the way someone holds something fragile that they don't trust themselves with. I could feel her breathing settle, though, slow down yard by yard as we got further. The sun was sitting fat and orange on the horizon when she said, behind me, "Where are you taking me?" Not a question the way she said it, like she was testing something. "Calloway's spread," I said. "That's where I'm headed. You can figure out what comes next from there." "Who's Calloway?" "Man I work for, decent enough. I'll talk to him." She went quiet again, then why? I didn't have a clean answer to that, not one that would have come out right anyway. "Because I found that iron in the yard," I said, "and I've seen one used before." She didn't ask anything else. Calloway's reaction when I rode in with her was not the easiest thing to navigate. He came out on the porch with his coffee and stood there looking at us, and I could see him working through it. He was a practical man, Calloway, fair but practical. He had a payroll to meet and neighbors in this county whose goodwill he needed, and a wife inside who had opinions about things. "Garrett," he said. "Mr. Calloway." "Who's that?" "Her name is Celia," I said. "Found her locked in a shed on the flats. She's got a brand on her arm. I'd like to put her in the spare room in the bunkhouse if that's agreeable. He looked at me, looked at her, looked at me again. You know what kind of trouble that is, he said. Not mean, just straight. I do, I said. He stood there a while with his coffee. The sky was going dark at the edges. Somewhere in the house his wife was making supper sounds. 1 week, he said. You find her a situation in 1 week. That's fair, I said. I got her down off the horse. The burn was infected by the 2nd day. I'm not a doctor. I've had enough of my own wounds to know a little about cleaning and keeping clean, but this was beyond what I'd dealt with. I went and got the woman who sometimes helped Mrs. Calloway, a Mexican woman named Refugio who'd been in this country 30 years and who didn't talk much but who knew what she was doing. She came out, looked at the arm, and she told me what she needed. I got what she needed. It took 2 weeks, not 1. Calloway didn't say anything about it. During those 2 weeks I didn't push Celia to talk. I'd bring food to the bunkhouse door and leave it. Sometimes she'd be awake when I came, sitting in the doorway with the morning light on her face, and we'd nod at each other. That was enough. Some things take time to set like bone. What I did do, one afternoon while she was sleeping and Refugio was there with her, was ride back out to those flats. The property was empty, horses gone, fire ring cold. I found the iron where I'd left it in the dirt because nobody had thought to take it. I picked it up, rode out to a gully about a mile north, and I threw it as far into that gully as I could manage. Watched it disappear into the scrub. Then I rode back. She told me, eventually, in pieces, the way people do when the words have been locked away too long and come out in whatever order they're willing. She was half Comanche on her mother's side and half something else on her father's that she didn't go into much. Her mother had died when she was young. She'd been working for a family in one of the small towns to the east, cooking, cleaning, the kind of work that paid almost nothing but kept you housed. When that family moved on, there'd been a man, and then another man, and somewhere in that chain of men who thought they had some claim on her, she'd ended up at that shed. She told it flat, no trembling in it, no performance, just facts laid out in the order they'd happened. I sat and I listened, and I didn't say much because there wasn't much to say that wasn't small against what she'd said. What I did say when she finished was, "You're not going back to any of that." She looked at me. Her eyes were dark brown, and they had a steadiness in them that I'd noticed early on, a quality of watching and measuring, the way a person watches and measures when they've had to learn that the world is full of things that can go wrong. "You don't know what I'm going back to," she said. "I know what you're not," I said. She looked at me a while. "You could have kept writing," she said, "past that shed." "I could have." "Why didn't you?" I thought about it. 19 years old and looking away from something I shouldn't have looked away from, and carrying that for decades, and whether that was really why I'd stopped or whether it was just the sound I'd heard. I don't know, maybe both. "Had to be a reason I circled back," I said. She didn't answer right away. Then she said, "Refugio says you rode out to the flats." "I did." "She says you threw it in the gully." "Did." Something shifted in her face. Small shift, but I saw it. The week became 2, and 2 became a month, and somewhere in there the conversation about finding her a situation stopped coming up. I don't know exactly when it stopped. It just did. Calloway didn't raise it again. Mrs. Calloway, who had come around in her own way, had started finding reasons for Celia to be in the house during the day. Things that needed doing that kept her close in. I didn't engineer any of that. I want to be honest about that. I didn't have a plan. I was just a trail hand who'd found something wrong and tried to make it right, and what came after was its own thing. What I know is that one evening in October I was sitting outside the bunkhouse after supper, the air going cold enough that you could see your breath if you breathed out slow, and Celia came and sat beside me on the bench without being asked. We sat there a while not talking. The sky out in that country in October is something. Stars come out thick, the kind of thick you don't see near towns, and the whole thing just opens up above you like it's trying to say something. "Refugio says the arm's healed clean," she said. "Good," I said. "There'll be a scar." "There will." She was quiet a moment. Then, "I don't want to cover it anymore." I looked at her. She was looking at the sky. "All right," I said. "I want people to see it," she said. I want them to ask, and I want to tell them what it was and who did it, and that there's a man named Garrett who threw the iron in the gully. I didn't say anything to that. I looked back at the sky. I want them to know, she said. What kind of man does that? I'm not a man who's been told much in his life. That he matters, I mean, that the particular way he's put together is worth something. I grew up poor on the Brazos, I drifted, I worked cattle, I got good at what I was good at, and I let that be enough. Wasn't self-pity in it. It was just the life. So I didn't know what to do with what she'd said. I sat there with it. You could have gone, I said finally. Once you were on your feet, nothing was keeping you. I know, she said. Calloway would have given you. I know, she said again, and there was something firm in it, not cutting me off exactly, just stopping that line of thinking before it went anywhere further. I know I could have gone, I didn't. I looked at her, she turned and looked at me. In the lamplight from the bunkhouse window, with the cold air coming and the stars doing what they do out there, she had the same steadiness in her eyes she'd had since the beginning. And looking at her looking at me, I understood that she was not staying because she had nowhere to go or because she owed me something. She was staying because she had looked at me, a man who'd ridden into that yard, who'd sat in that doorway and kept his hands open and low, who'd gone back to the gully, and she had made a decision. It was the clearest I'd been seen in a long time, maybe ever. She reached over and put her hand over mine, where it was resting on my knee. She didn't say anything, didn't have to. I turned my hand over and held hers. Winter came hard that year, which it does in that country, snow coming in off the plains like it means something personal. The crew doubled up in the bunkhouse, and nobody said much about the arrangement because Calloway didn't invite anybody to. Mrs. Calloway started teaching Celia to read better. She could read some, but not well, and in the evenings I'd sometimes hear them at the kitchen table, the low sound of a word being sounded out, the quiet laugh when she got it. I did my work, that's what I know how to do. I fixed fence, I rode, I kept Calloway's cattle where they were supposed to be, I kept the horses right. It's not a glamorous life, and I'd never pretended it was. But there's something in doing your work well, in being the man who shows up and does what needs doing and doesn't cut corners about it, and having someone who sees that, who actually sees it. Celia saw it. She never made a show of it, that's not how she was, but she noticed things. She noticed when I'd been out in the cold too long and she'd have coffee ready without being asked. She noticed when something was troubling me and she'd sit close without pushing at it. She noticed the kind of man I was, all of it, the steady parts and the hard parts and the quiet parts, and she didn't look away from any of it. That is not a small thing. I know that now, though I didn't have words for it then. There was trouble in the spring, the way there's always trouble somewhere. 3 men came to the Calloway place in March, riding up from the south, and I knew before they got to the yard what they were. Something about the way they rode, loose, too casual, the kind of casual that's practiced. One of them had the look of a man who rented other people out, soft in the hands but hard around the eyes. Calloway met them in the yard. I stayed where I was at the corral and I kept working, but I kept watch. They talked a while, I couldn't hear it. Calloway shook his head, more talking. Calloway shook his head again, and his voice came up a little, not angry but definite in that way he had, and then he pointed at the road. They looked at me. I set down what I was holding, and I straightened up and I looked back. They looked a while. Then they looked at Calloway again and said something, and he said something back, and then they rode out. That evening Calloway came by the corral. They wanted her back, he said. It wasn't a question. I expect so, I said. I told them there was no such person here. I nodded. They may come back, he said. They may, I said. He looked at me a moment. You're a good hand, Garrett, he said, which was not something he said often. Then he went back to the house. Celia had watched from the bunkhouse door. When I walked back across the yard, she was still standing there. They'll try again, she said. Might, I said. What do we do? We're already doing it, I said. We stay, we keep on. She looked at me for a long moment. Then she stepped forward, right there in the yard with the light going, and she put her arms around me. Not frantic in it, not desperate. Just full and steady the way she was, and her face against my neck and her breath warm, and I held on to her and I let it be what it was. They didn't come back. Come summer, I talked to a man in town who had a small piece of ground he couldn't work anymore, knees gone bad. 40 acres, a creek on the eastern edge. A house that needed work but had good bones. The price was one I could manage if I sold the horse I'd been holding back for myself and borrowed a little against the next season's wages. I talked to Calloway. He didn't try to keep me, that's not how he was. He shook my hand, and he told me I'd been a good hand, and I told him he'd been a fair man to work for, and that was enough between us. I talked to Celia. We were sitting at the table in the bunkhouse. Her bunkhouse by then, really. I'd been sleeping in the main crew quarters for months, and I laid it out as plain as I could. The land, the house, the creek, the price, what I could do with it in a year if the weather held, what it would mean to have a place that was ours. She listened to all of it. When I finished, she looked at the table for a moment, and then she looked at me. "You're asking me," she said. "I am," I said. "You could have just told me," she said. "You could have just said this is what we're doing, most men would." "I know," I said. She nodded slowly. "That's why I'm saying yes," she said. We moved to that place in August, dry and gold and the creek running low but clear. I built the porch rail first because she wanted somewhere to sit in the evenings and watch the sun go down, and then I fixed the roof, and then we worked on the rest of it together, the way you work when the thing you're building is yours. The arm, the scar, she never did cover it again. She wore her sleeves short all that summer, and when people in town looked at it, and some of them did, she let them look. A few asked, and she told them, flat and plain, the way she told me, what it was and who'd done it, and that there was a man who'd thrown the iron in the gully. I heard her tell it once, to a woman at the dry goods who'd asked. She told it all the way through, and then at the end she said, "That man is my husband, and he's standing right behind me." I was standing right behind her. I didn't say anything. I wasn't going to make it smaller by adding to it. We had the first hard frost early that year. October, sharp and fast, the kind that comes overnight and leaves the whole world silver in the morning. I woke up before the light and the house was cold, and I got the stove going and stood there with my hands near the heat while the sky came up slow and pink out the east window. She came out of the back in her blanket, her hair loose, stood beside me at the stove. We didn't talk. The coffee came up and I poured it, and we stood there together watching the frost catch the first light outside. It did that thing it does, lit up, every blade of grass holding a little piece of the sun, the whole field of it, 40 acres and the creek beyond. This is mine, I thought, this ground, this house, this woman who chose to stay. Not because she had to, because she looked at me and saw something worth staying for. I put my arm around her and she leaned into me, the blanket still around her shoulders, and she put her head against my chest. I could feel her breathing. Outside, the field was going white to gold as the light moved across it. I held on to her. That's all I can tell you. That's the whole of it, I think. A man does the right thing, and sometimes the right thing is the thing that opens everything else up. I don't know why I pulled that bar. I only know I'm glad I did. The coffee got cold. Neither of us moved to tend to it.